You're listening to Nonprofits Now, the podcast brought to you by Three Valleys Community Foundation. I'm Dr. Kelly Bowers, and I am your host. Joining us today is Susan Houghton, one of our co-founders of Three Valleys Community Foundation, as well as our board secretary. So, Susan, you're an extremely busy person, and we're very happy to have you here today because you have been involved in many nonprofits in the local community and region, and particularly Three Valleys Community Foundation, which you are a co-founder of. So I think we're all really curious, particularly me, because I came in late to the party. How did it all start? What was the inception? What was the impetus? You were part of it from the very beginning. Tell us the origin.
Oh, gosh. Thanks, Kelly. And so great to be here and to talk about Three Valleys because it is something I'm very passionate about, giving back. And I think a lot of people in our community are as well. It was back in 2020, quite frankly, during the whole COVID issues that were going on. A lot of folks were saying, what can I do? One of those was Steve McCoy-Thompson, who is now also a Three Valleys board member. And he came to me and said, I have this idea. And I said, I'll join you on that idea with one caveat, that we really resurrect a community foundation in our region. You know, there used to be a community foundation years ago, and our area, the East Bay area of Alameda County, had really not been served in a way that I think folks were hoping to be able to take it to the next step. So we started making calls, and I opened up my phone book and called people who I felt had that same commitment to philanthropy and had the same commitment to our region, and said, will you join us? And I kept getting yes, yes, yes. And after, I think I made 4 calls and got 4 immediate yeses, and I knew that we were on to something. And of course, one of the first call I made was to John Sensiba, who is a very well-known local leader, and I'd worked closely with him on a number of projects. And I knew he was the right person to lead the organization, and was thrilled when he said yes.
So that brings me to the part about leadership, because it is so key, especially in the very beginning. So if all these people were saying yes, who were they? And why were they chosen? Or why were they tapped? And why did they ultimately join?
Well, the rule in nonprofits is really you look for people who can give their time, talents, and treasure as part of that. And treasure can be, come in many different forms. Maybe that treasure is access. Maybe that treasure is knowledge. Maybe that treasure is finances. And I think with the Community Foundation, you really want a little bit of both. You want people who know nonprofits. And so we asked very well-known local nonprofit leaders to join us on that cause. Chris Carter, Melanie Sadek. We looked for folks who knew the nonprofit world and could help guide us along those ways. We also looked for people who represented our community geographically. We wanted people from the Danville area, people like Judy Lloyd. We wanted people from Livermore, people like Kenneth Cooper, who had knowledge of various areas and could broaden our thoughts, really broaden our way that we looked at how we could serve our Three Valley area. So when you think of Three Valleys, you think of it as, the Amador, Livermore, San Ramon valleys. And we said, we're not only going to have that by name, we're going to go out and have that by realistic who we are. Walk the walk, talk the talk at the same time.
And so right from the very beginning, as you assembled everyone, you came up with a vision and a mission, and that kind of guides every action and every decision that's being made. And they're sort of for all time. They have to outlast any of the leaders who might be in there, because that is what the organization stands for. So how did that come about, and what is the vision and what is the mission?
Yeah, so our vision and mission is really to have an area where everyone in the Three Valleys can live the quality of life that they want to live. And that defines by different people. For some people, it might mean access to programs. For some people, it might be the vibrant arts and supporting the arts. For some people, it might be education. But we looked for people who represented those areas, and then we started talking. People like Christine Wente came in very early on and helped us say, here's the vision, the brand you want, something she does so exceptionally well. Kenneth Cooper was instrumental in helping us identify our values, the ethics and integrity that we needed. And we look for people who had differing points of view, because we all don't want this to be, so homogeneous that it's just our vision or nothing else. But argue with us. Tell us how we should change. Tell us how we should evolve. Community foundations inherently support the communities they serve, and they do that not by one mission or one vision or one entity or organization, by saying, what does the community need? And how can we support the organizations and most primarily the donors of those organizations in giving back? So we think of ourselves as a conduit between the private donors who want to support local nonprofits, the corporations who care about the causes, the government entities and cities who say, you know what, we need somebody to umbrella and have this grant making for us. We want to be the center of it all as a community foundation.
So there's already the Silicon Valley Foundation, which I understand is
Right.
very large and very established. And then there's East Bay.
Yeah.
So what is particularly different about Three Valleys? And how do they fit in? And is it a very collaborative space?
I'm really glad you asked that question because I'll be honest with you, I knew nothing about community foundations when we started this. I had spent years in nonprofit work, and my background had been in corporate communications and in government relations and in local media. But, the world of philanthropy is like a whole new world of philanthropy. And so we did a lot of benchmarking early on. And luckily in those years, that 2020 year, you could do that all from home and make calls and talk to people. And so we talked to probably 50 different community foundation leaders.
Wow.
And said, tell us what we need to know. Tell us what we shouldn't do. Tell us what we should do. And Silicon Valley Community Foundation was one of the first embracers of our vision. Not only did they say, can we help you? They said, we'll help you with your back-end cryptocurrency and complex gifts. Yay, because we needed to know that. Not that cryptocurrency is a big deal anymore, but it was at the time, and we needed to know how to process these. Another favorite was San Joaquin Community Foundation. Couldn't have been nicer to help us. And who knew that San Joaquin and Stockton has such a vibrant community foundation, but they did. And they eventually became our initial back office partner to help us with the processing and the grant making on that end. We talked to many other entities, the Council on Foundation, which provides accreditation to community foundations, the League of California Community Foundations, which is helping local California foundations get to the next step. And all of that painted a picture for our board of what was important to us and what we wanted to embrace and emulate and what we wanted to do a little bit differently, to be honest with you. Community foundations, 800 nationwide, started in 1914. And so, there are many community foundations that are around geographical entities. And chances are you go to any place in the United States, you'll find one. But we wanted to be one that was accredited. And so we're on a path forward to get to that so that we can have what we call trust and transparency and that Tri-Valley focus.
And what about East Bay Community Foundation? Have they been helpful also? Have you partnered with them in any ways?
East Bay was very helpful initially. And they not only told us how to structure, they gave us consultant ideas as part of that. Their mission is very different from ours. And that's an important thing for us to talk about. We are not in competition with the East Bay Community Foundation. We embrace them and want them to succeed, just like we want all community foundations to succeed. We are serving an entirely different population, and we still cross-collaborate on donors, and we talk to them all the time. So we're thankful that it is such a collaborative space because, frankly, we couldn't do it without them.
And then as you had this journey and you went along, you envisioned it, you had to get nonprofit status. Were there any challenges, any barriers? Did you ever just say, maybe this isn't even going to really happen?
Oh, well, I think you can always second guess yourself and say woulda, shoulda, coulda. But actually, we've been very fortunate. Thanks to Houghton, we had an expedited 501c3 affiliation granted by the IRS. Early on, entities like the Pleasanton Weekly said, hey, will you run our holiday fund? So that was an impetus for us to get going and get it action. And everywhere we turned, people said, wow, this is a really great idea. I'm glad you're doing it. We talked to local cities, Pleasanton, Livermore, Dublin, and they jumped on the bandwagon. Supervisor David Halbert, first one to step up and say, you know what? I'm going to help you. We're going to give you money from Alameda County to set the stage for you. And we couldn't have done that without all of them. It takes a village. And you hear that phrase a lot, it takes a village. It really does take a village because all of us have different expertise, and we rely on Pat O'Brien for his financial expertise. We rely on members of our board to give us the visioning. We have a wonderful person leading, Colleen Gregerson, leading our grant making, and all of those people together is what makes our community foundation, I think, vibrant and strong.
And some of these questions, obviously, I work for the foundation, and so I know some of this, but I didn't live it. I came late to the party. Basically, I was hired as the first permanent CEO president.
And thank God we hired you. How wonderful. We're so thrilled. No, we feel like, wow, we won the lottery on that one, Kelly. Well, and you know that. We know how we feel. I mean, you have such a great reputation locally. People have loved you for years as the superintendent. You, I think, are passionate in every single way about the Valley. And that's exactly what we want. We want that excitement. We see that excitement. Join our excitement and be a part of our Three Valleys Foundation community family.
Well, and that reminds me of the first time I heard you speak about it. I was in my Rotary, the Noon Rotary in Livermore, and you and John Sensiba, the board chair, came, and you just started sharing about Three Valleys Community Foundation. So ironic, just next week I'll be presenting at my same Rotary, and I'll be talking about Three Valleys, but now from the perspective of my role. But I remember that day vividly because you came in and you had so much excitement about this process and programs and the things you were doing. And there was one particularly that caught my heart was you talked about the Dublin Fallen Officers Fund. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't even a large amount of money necessarily in the scheme of philanthropy, but the cause just really touched me. Could you go in a little more detail about that? Because I'm sure not everyone even realizes the impact it had.
Yeah, that was a really important fund for us because it demonstrated, thanks to our interim executive director, Nelson Fiallo, and Linda Smith, who was the city manager at the time, terrible incident that happened with that deputy, but they wanted to quickly be able to give funds to the fallen officer's family. And Nelson and Linda worked very quickly together and were able to set up a fund. We launched it. We were able to take in donations as a 501c3 and then later re-grant that to the family as part of it. Community foundations have that ability to act in an emergency, to stand up quickly. You did it in Sunol. You helped launch that with David Halbert when we had the terrible flooding in Sunol. And I think that's what we want people to understand, especially in emergencies or epidemics. And I remember one of the people saying this, Livermore Chamber, they just didn't know who to donate to, and they wanted the ability to donate to somebody. And if you're not a 501c3, you don't necessarily have that ability to congregate a field of interest fund or to be able to focus in a certain area. And community foundations can do that. So the Fallen Officers Fund was a great initial fund that Nelson really led. And we were fortunate after he left the city of Pleasanton to have him join us as our interim executive director.
And then I was fortunate enough to follow in his footsteps, and he had set up things so well. But I remember that day at Rotary and thinking, this is exactly what we need. This is what we needed probably during COVID, because a lot of our surrounding communities had a community foundation that was already established in order to be so responsive during that time. And I remember coming home that night and wanting to donate to be what you called a founding champion.
Yeah.
And so my husband and I went online and we're like, I want to be a founding champion. We need to donate some of the startup money because it is a startup. And as I did that, my husband looked over my shoulder and he knew that I was going to be retiring soon, or shifting phases of graduating, whatever you want to call it, from into my, as I finished up my career as a superintendent in Livermore School District. And we started to look, and he said, look, they actually have a job there. Mm-hmm. And the CEO president, he goes, that's right up your alley, because you can have passion and for projects, you're community oriented, you have all these relationships. This is your zone. And I was kind of excited about it, but then I thought, I don't know much about community foundations. And yet I'm a lifelong learner. I just figured that I can learn the other pieces of leadership and working with people. And, I have that kind of down. And then as I started looking at the board that it was assembled, I said, oh, Tim Sabrante, oh, Susan Houghton, oh, my goodness, Christine Wente, these people I would be thrilled and honored to work with them.
Yeah, we were thrilled to have you work with us. I think when I look at our board, you mentioned some wonderful names. Margaret Lang is another example of somebody who's giving and living in Dublin and supporting philanthropy there. And our advisory board, it's important that we talk a little bit about the difference between our advisory board as well as our board of directors, because our advisors come in expertise areas. People like Catherine Baker, are coming in to tell us, hey, you ought to consider this. Tim Sabrante, who you mentioned. And those advisors work with us, Joe Cristiano from Bank of San Francisco, to help us give us different perspectives. We don't know what we don't know, and we need to be able to go out and investigate what's important to our community and how we can be better as an organization to serve our valley.
One of the biggest learning curves for me were the acronyms, because I remember actually probably even the interview process, someone used the term DAF, and I literally had to check my ears. I said, "Death? What were they saying? DAF?" And now donor advised fund just rolls off my tongue. But tell me a little bit about why or how people would establish a donor advised fund, because I'm able to now see it in action. But at the time, it was new to me. I had never opened up one.
Sure. And you're right. There are a million different acronyms associated with philanthropy in it, and we're learning every single day. But a donor advised fund, also known as a DAF, is a way for you to establish, think of it as a bank account, but that is a tax-deductible bank account at our community foundation that allows you to grant funds from that bank account all year long. So for many people who might have to take a qualified deduction at the end of the year or have to get rid of some funds in order to make sure they're not taxable, we are an opportunity for them to do so. If they have to take a qualified distribution from their 401k, they can open up a fund at Three Valleys, put $10,000 in there, and it immediately becomes a tax deduction because they get the deduction from Three Valleys. As a 501c3, we afford them that immediate deduction for the IRS. But what it allows them to do is time over the whole year to decide who of the nonprofits in our community they want to re-grant out to. And it's really that re-granting process. You may need to make an immediate tax deduction, but you don't know who to give it to. You actually can help them decide how to do that and that's the value of a community foundation. We have some people go, I know I want to give to the arts. I don't know who to give to in the arts. And so by you bringing in opportunities via the wonderful art community organizations that we have, donors can go, oh, I really like that about them, or I didn't know that about them, or oh, I want to learn more about them. And you are that conduit back and forth to be able to provide that.
Yeah, I like to say I'm a matchmaker because I take people who have a passion or a generous heart and they have some funds and they want to give, but maybe they're not sure where to or how to. And so I can find those causes that they care about, find the need. A lot of times it's about surfacing the need. I think there's a lot of misimpression out there that people, that's probably why I was drawn to it, is that people think sometimes in the Three Valleys area that everyone's affluent and they see the beautiful vineyards and all these wonderful things. And many people are enjoying, a very robust life and very enriched life. But there are also under the surface, there are people barely getting by and sometimes suffering. So sometimes it's about that sobering reality of saying, here's statistics. And even if they are affluent, mental health is an issue that cuts across all demographics. And so kind of raising that, some of the concerns, some of the needs, and saying, these are areas where people are struggling. And so we do have a high quality of life, but there's still gaps.
Right.
And I think that's when I see a community foundation is they can start to fill in some of those gaps in between what private industry is doing and what social services are doing, as well as what the government can do. And really, nonprofits are that safety net that boost everybody.
We have wonderful health organizations, John Muir, Stanford Valley Care, Kaiser, who have done great work looking at the health needs assessments of our region. And that's important work. It's important statistics as part of that. What we can also do is amplify that. And amplify that in a way that allows for grant making. And I think you did that last year when you had our end of the year event where we talked about the statistics. We have a $42 billion GDP economy. It's probably up to 47 now, but when we started, it was $42 billion. and less than 0.5% of the money from that GDP economy comes back into philanthropy. So in our region, how can we amplify that? And I do see you being able to kind of pull everything together. And I think our board is committed to that.
I also remember, so when I was in my other role, I was on Innovation Tri-Valley leadership team, working with Dale Kay and a lot of people. And I was almost always from the education side, and even also empowering the youth. And one of the things that we worked on was a Vision 2040 plan. And I did help, I think, manage and facilitate the youth group and the youth voice about the future and the things that they cared about and what they want to see if they can afford to live in the Three Valleys area. What kinds of concerns they had, and a lot about sustainability and the environment, and certainly equity and diversity. These are things that come very naturally to the young people. And one of the elements, I came to find out, of the 2040 plan, which was not the area that I was involved in because I was working with the youth from my other hat, was the impetus, I think, for this foundation. So can you tell me a little bit? I think it was number 17 on
I think it's 19, but maybe. Okay. But I think you're right, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because this was like kismet for us, and we're like, okay, this was fate. When I called John Sensiba and asked him if he'd be interested, and he said, yes, but what you don't even know is, because I was not privy to the Innovation Tri-Valley Leadership Group vision, is that this is actually one of the vision that we have for the 2040 plan. And who knew? And it was to enhance the private, philanthropic, public-private partnerships in our region. And so it was perfect. And I actually think that we were the number one goal that they executed in those early years. Yeah, the first one, to be able to say, yes, that we are resurrecting the ability for private philanthropy in our area, and to be able to enhance what corporations and governments are already doing. We were thrilled. And that really was like, okay, we're on the right path. And I think Innovation Tri-Valley has done an excellent job in putting forth that vision. And of course, we have a close partnership. You have a close partnership with Katie, and it's going well.
So now I'm going to talk a little bit. Actually, I'm going to probe a little bit more about Susan, the person, not just Susan as part of Three Valleys. And so I know that you're very passionate about nonprofit work, and that you've been involved in not just with Three Valleys, which is probably why this was such a natural extension. But my understanding is you've co-founded or founded other nonprofits, and some of them I know of better. And I'm just wondering if you can share a little bit about that, and how does that fit in, and how does the Community Foundation work with them or help them also?
Well, yes. I mean, I have had some experience in nonprofits, founding several nonprofit organizations. Probably the one that is most identifiable to our listeners would be Sunflower Hill, which I have a son with a moderate autism who believes Disney princesses are real. I think we all should. And he wants everyone to be happy, but can never live on his own. So Sunflower Hill was really founded by a group of parents who said, if not us, then who? And if not now, then when? And we need to create long-term residential options for our own children and others. We do have a community in Irby Ranch in Pleasanton, and Robbie lives there. And he is a happy camper and will live there the rest of his life. But going broader than that, I do think, somebody said to me once early on, my background was in television and journalism, and then I went to the corporate side and spent many years working for University of California and Lawrence Livermore National Lab. And this is like the third phase, the philanthropy phase. So you go through the journalism phase where you're an active journalist, and then I was a corporate person, and now I'm in my philanthropy phase. And it's a different type of reward to see people feel fulfilled. We're just little specks on that journey. We're just contributing what we can to move it forward. The real work is at the nonprofit level of the staff, and they deserve the credit for moving it forward. And it's a hard job. It's hard to have nonprofits staff live in our Bay Area. We know that, have the salaries they have. And so as much as we can do with unrestricted giving to organizations, I think make an important impact. And that's why some of the field of interest impacts grants that you're funding, the new arts fund that you're funding, they help our local nonprofits raise money in a way that isn't active on their end. It's enhancing what they're doing. We want to enhance. So I like to think of it as just a little baby step that we can do to make a better Three Valleys.
And it does seem to be that the nonprofits, if they could focus on doing the direct service rather than the fundraising piece, if we could begin to or continue and to amplify and elevate their causes and get more funding to them, then that might take away that burden, and then they can do the real work.
Yeah, we want them to be the direct service providers as much as we can. We have so many nonprofits on the front line, especially in the health and human services area. I think of agencies like Tri-Valley Haven, Open Heart Kitchen, the ones who are on the front line doing the day in, day out work. They don't want to have to worry about how to keep the lights on. So how do we help them keep the lights on? How do we help them through our foundation with bringing them donors who they may never have uncovered before because those donors didn't know who they were? And that's something that's really important. We had many people who we talked to, many private donors who joined our journey to say, I'm so glad you're here because I didn't know where to look. I didn't know how to access. I didn't have time to research these areas. And that's where Three Valleys and your staff can come in, Kelly.
And one of the other values I know that was really important has been collaboration. And so the Power of Collaboration campaign was really fun to run last year. And then now we're doing it again this year. And the reason why I think I liked it and probably why you envisioned it was this concept of a lot of times in private industry, people are competitive. We obviously have a capitalist society and that's how people function. But in this space, it was exciting to see that you could have a John Muir and a Stanford Health both working together, both contributing and helping our community, because they might be, competing in other ways, but they're also very complementary and working together toward common health causes. And likewise, we have, Heritage Bank and Fremont Bank and Poppy Bank all giving for the same cause, which was mental health and wellness last year. And so that was a really wonderful cause where you have places like Amazon and PG&E stepping up first and then challenging others to give and then to invest in the community foundation and also invest back in the community.
Couldn't agree with you more. And when we started, you mentioned founding champions early on. We first went out and said, okay, we'll all put some of our own money in this, but we also need people who say, individuals, I'm going to join your train. I'm going to be on your vision. Mm-hmm. And they became our founding champions, providing those early funds to help us launch. We also had corporations do the same, and that's where the Power of Collaboration campaign came in. Not only were they giving some unrestricted gifts, they were giving money to re-grant in our community. And I think you did an exceptional job bringing all of them together as collaborators. We have to collaborate. If we have a community issue that is affecting the people who live here, it's going to take all of us, the corporations, the governments, the individuals, the nonprofits working together to make that difference. And I see it only growing. I think last year you gave out through our DAFs and our other funds more than $800,000. You just got a $3 million award through Alameda County for opioids. So we're going to be giving out those mini grants this next year.
That's exciting.
It is exciting, and we should be very proud of it. And I know you're thrilled and you work very hard to do that. And it's important to be able to have that back and forth communications to help understand from our organizational perspective what is needed. And opioid crisis is one that not a lot of people know about, but they've heard it. They just don't know the depth of it, as you said earlier. Is it really happening here?
And I know that there's a lot of things on our website, and we have brochures and pamphlets that talk about things, but I'm kind of sometimes in a nutshell person. And so in a nutshell, there's a couple taglines.
Well, we love alliteration, as you know.
This is true.
We want to give. We want people to give. We want people to join us to give so that together we can grant the funds individually, grant the funds in grant making, and then finally that allows us to grow. And we grow in many ways, not just, it's figuratively and literally. Community foundations are judged by the number of assets they have on hand, but they're also judged by the grant making and the dollars they give out. But growing as a person, as an entity, in that spirit of what Three Valleys is, where when you come back, everyone just leading the life that they want to live in a meaningful way that allows us to have, happiness at the end. That's what it's all about.
And I also like that concept of not just growing the foundation and growing the assets in order to give and grant, but also growing that sense of community, that sense of belonging, of being seen and being part of something that's larger than you. I think what is so exciting is when we see people come together and they're part of something and they know that they have contributed to make this big difference. And so that's really been fun. It's growing that community foundation, $1, one donor, one contribution at a time.
Well, and I think there's also a misnomer that you have to have a lot of money in order to have a fund at a community foundation. And no, you do not. We take DAFs as low as $5,000, and that allows you to test us out. And, we don't want people to feel like, oh my gosh, I've got to leave my Fidelity or Schwab account. We want them to try us. And I would challenge that to whoever's listening. Give us a try. Let us show you how we can serve with local banking, with local folks guiding us, that trust, transparency, so that we have that Tri-Valley focus.
And there's one other tagline that I really like because it falls on the local resources staying local. So I think you coined it, so I want to make sure that you say it.
Well, which local one is that? Because I've got a couple of them.
It's give.
Grant.
No.
Okay. This is our new one. I'm glad you qualified that one.
There we go.
So last year, when we gave our first kind of state of philanthropy in the Tri-Valley, we did a lot of research on, how many nonprofits were getting local dollars. We have a number of local corporations who are housed here that may not be giving here. They might be giving nationally, or they might be giving internationally. And we don't begrudge that. We want them to give to the causes that are important to them. But we also want them to give locally. So we've come up with our new phrase that will continue into 2025, give where you live. Let's all do that. Let's give where we live together. And even if it's just a small portion, let's watch it grow. Let's have it grow over the next year so that maybe it's 10% if you're not giving locally. I mean, we all want to give to our colleges and our alma maters. We all have those other causes. But I think the challenge is to find a way where everyone can give where they live. And let's see that impact.
Well, and I think that's exciting because you see the tangible effect. Mm-hmm. So when we did the We Are Pleasanton campaign, and I came in at the tail end, but I was fortunate enough to be able to actually grant the money. It was a real community movement. Todd Uticall and I know, Mike Madden, and people got together and they pooled their funds. We had this fund. We granted the check to the Pleasanton School District earmarked for ADA compliance at the field. And so it's just something that was a need. They saw it, they filled it, it happened very quickly, and it's there now for all time.
And, to me, that's the best way to have philanthropy start. It's organic. Think about that. The power of the people who came together and said, if not us, then who? If not now, then when? They did that. And we were able to be their fiscal agent for that. And we played a very small role facilitating what was really a very organic experience. And I think we've seen that in a number of other areas. You did something for KKIQ last year. You're working with the Pleasanton Weekly and Embarcadero Media now on what they want to do. And that is how we can be an asset in the community, helping people who already have the vision, who already have the commitment, just taking them to the next level.
So when you were growing up, do you recall what your first cause that you ever gave your first donation, big or small?
I grew up with a very Republican mother and father who lived in Los Angeles, but my mom was probably the first environmental Republican. And she was taking on all of the environmental causes down for the water districts in San Gabriel Valley in the Pasadena area because she saw what she considered to be an injustice. My father was involved in very many service clubs. I think was president of every service club that ever existed. And so they instilled really that paying back forward concept. For me, I think the first deal that I did, you could be as early as Girl Scouts and contributing to funds that Girl Scouts are doing or contributing in high school to the service clubs. I was in Girls League and Girls Club and all of that. And so you're paying it forward. I can't tell you how important I think that is to instill in the next generation. And in fact, that's one of the things I know that you're going to be focusing on in 2025 is really how can we help that next generation of philanthropists in the family understand the value of paying it forward. Impact Diablo Valley, one of our funds that we have, is doing an incredible job of that, teaching at a very young age how to pay it forward by their grant making.
And I was thinking about how when I was growing up, my very first exposure to giving outside was the Jerry Lewis telethon. So when a lot of kids were camping, I guess, on Labor Day, my parents were taking us to the Jerry Lewis telethon, and we were doing timpani for muscular dystrophy. And so that was, we were answering the phone calls, and it was so exciting as you could see the numbers come in and the excitement build, and then knowing it was going to go for a cause. And I had a friend in elementary school who had muscular dystrophy. And so I really felt immediately that, I had some privilege and some abilities that she didn't have. And, we're still Facebook friends all these years later. And it just really imprinted in my heart, that idea. And that when I think of nonprofit work or even Three Valleys work, it's hard work, but it's hard work. And that's something that I think is very important. And when I meet with donors, I always want to impress upon them, there are the statistics. And so I kind of, they have to wrap their head around that. But then also there's the stories, there's the real human element. And behind every data point and statistic is a person who may be struggling, may be suffering, and just with a little bit of help, things can be so much better.
I think that's so important. I'm glad you mentioned that, because until we've walked in the shoes of others, we don't really know. As a mother of a child with moderate autism, I felt that early on. And if somebody had said to me, you're going to have a son with autism, and you're going to probably be involved in organizations dedicated to IDD for the rest of your life, I would have said, great idea, but let's not sign up for that train. And so none of us know what life is going to hit us with, or what our friends or our family may be afflicted by. And many people do end up starting their work in nonprofit or affiliations with giving because of that personal cause. And then it grows from there to be able to expand it. But I do think it is important. Until you've walked in the shoes of others, it's hard to understand what life is really like.
And I think that's what was so meaningful last year. Some of the grants for the mental health and wellness that we gave out to Z Cares and Alan Hu Foundation, those arose from personal tragedies of families and of youth. And yet their families were able to, wrap around services and help so that no other family has to experience that. And so that's really rewarding to be part of helping them with their causes.
Well, as we come into November, which is traditionally, the time that we're all thankful, and you think about giving back, it is a good opportunity to kind of just do a reset and say, from a family perspective, from a personal perspective, how can I pay it forward? How can I be grateful? And being grateful, as we think of November, is also a way to say, what can I do in my community to pay it forward and help others reach that level of gratitude? You don't know what else to say?
I don't know. What have we not covered? I don't know how much we should say in one session.
I think it's time to end it, Kelly Bowers.
Although I always have something to say.
I think this podcast is a way for us to kind of talk about things. And I know as you continue to book guests, you're going to be bringing in outside folks who have various views of philanthropy. And we want to hear it all. We want to hear, what people think, where we should go, what we're doing, and hear the stories of how philanthropy has made a difference.
There was one thing I wanted to ask about, because we know we've chewed on this one before and we've kind of wrestled with it, is the idea of some parts of philanthropy seem almost transactional. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. Mm-hmm. But there's a larger movement toward more transformational.
Yeah, and that was a great lesson that we learned from one of those 50 people that we talked to. We talked to Stanislaus Community Foundation, and the CEO president there said, sometimes when people give, and think about it, you make a donation, you go, okay, if that's fine, here's my credit card. It's so easy to do that. Just give a credit card, it's fine, walk away. And the rule in nonprofits is that it's so much easier to retain a donor than to get a new donor. So if you have somebody who gives to your organization, you should work very hard, whatever that means, stewardship, to find out why they gave to you in the first place and what they need to do, what you need to do to retain them as a donor. Otherwise, that donation or that commitment is just transactional. And what you want is to get people to feel it's transformational. You want to go from just not taking the donations to people joining the family, so that together, as you join that greater philanthropy, you're making a transformational impact on the community through that collective voice. So transactional is how you start. Transformational giving is what your goal is.
And also, I think it's a way of looking at the larger picture of what we're doing. So transactional might be you give this money and it goes here, but transformational is not a Band-Aid. It's not an easy fix. It's not an immediate thing. It might be over time. Some of these deep root causes of some of the social issues we're dealing with and grappling with can actually be resolved.
Absolutely. And that's why organizations like ITV set a 2040 vision, because they're saying, here's our goal. Here's the goal line of where we want to get to. And we may not see that change affected today, but that goal of where to get there in 20 years becomes transformational. And it becomes inherent and embedded into your society so that it just becomes the norm. And that transformation is what you want it to be, a norm that allows us to all rise together. Okay, podcast number 1 done.
I don't know.
And we're going next. And, here is to a great 2025 where we are going to hope that people are going to join our train, join our philanthropy train, and be on the vision for Three Valleys Community Foundation.
I like that.
Thank you.
I'm already on board the train.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Three Valleys.